If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniak. Hello everyone. I have another cold again somehow, so sorry if my voice sounds different in this. I might as well just announce when my voice sounds normal, because it will sound different from being so unwell, because I'm ill so often. But I hope you're all doing great and enjoy this video. Some people are asking for longer videos, so that's what I'm going to do from now. Let me know what you think. Hope you're all having a great day and enjoy this. A little bit of background about myself. I worked my entire adult life in the Pacific Northwest woods. Over 15 years in total, with about 7 years of that being for the Park Service at Olympic National Park. Many experiences over the years could warrant the title of creepy, but this one in particular always stuck with me. While working for the Park Service, one of my jobs was that of a restoration carpenter. We would travel to old backcountry historical cabins, emergency shelters, homesteads and chalets, tasked with repairing, restoring, and the maintenance of old historical estates. This was a wonderful yet demanding job. I'd spend 8 days at a time living off the beaten path, usually deep in the woods in the backcountry. Sometimes we'd be flown in supplies. Sometimes we'd use llamas or mules to pack our gear on, all the while sleeping in thinly walled single tents, cooking over a fire or a whisper-light stove, using the same tools and techniques the original homesteaders had at their disposal in the late 1800s to construct and survive off this unforgiving environment. One late fall, I was assigned to work near Lake Ozatep at an old homestead off the trail, near the constructed boardwalk. For those unfamiliar with the area, Lake Ozatep is 8 miles long and 3 miles wide. It's a large, natural lake in Washington. Lake Ozatep has a long and rich history of Native American culture. The Mucka Tribal Center in Nipe houses discoveries found in the area dating back 2,000 years, along with a local village that was well preserved from over 300 years ago by a mudslide that left most of the artifacts intact. The Ozatep Loop Trail, which the homestead was directly adjacent to, is approximately 9 miles through and through. The man-made boardwalk takes you under giant cedar groves, meanders through huge patches of chest-high sala before delivering you to Alsama's Parade, about 2.5 miles from the trailhead. Now, this is a giant soggy meadow, which once farmed 2 Swedish immigrants. They constructed a small cabin and some outbuildings on the 150-acre bog, with cattle, sheep, vegetables, and garden stuff. Now, they held out here for over 50 years. Over time, the forest, as it always does, decides to take back its own. The now deceased, long abandoned farm was hardly recognizable. Our job was to beat back the encroaching forest, put new windows in the main cabin, pipe in a new stove, and apply fresh paint and fix up proportions of the semi-dilated barn. The ultimate goal being to allow guided tours to take place sometime in the future. For about 3 weeks, we stayed at the Ozatep bunkhouse while working at this place. This was good duty for us. We weren't sleeping under the rain. The beds were warm, our hike was short, and the train not so difficult. We had a TV. The bunkhouse was located near the highway and the ranger station. We would have to hike the 5-mile loop every day, bringing us boards, tools, paint, and everything else we needed. These were full 10-hour plus days. These would usually start at 7 in the morning, beginning us to the bunkhouse, finishing at around 5. At one point during the fall, there were 4 of us walking and working towards this project. By the time of the event, there was only 2 of us remaining. Most of the hard work was already done. We needed to hike a few last boards into the prairie to complete a proportion of the woodshed before we called the job done. I volunteered to pack the mule for the day, my only job being to carry as many boards as I could muster in each trip to the prairie before returning to the ranger station for the next load. It was late in the season for hikers at this point. The weather had turned and we'd be lucky to see 2 or 3 people a day doing the loop. Around the 4th and 5th trip, I was pretty tired. It's late in the evening now, around 4, and my co-worker called it a day. I thought I could get one more trip in before it got too dark. My rationale being, the more trips I did today, the less it is tomorrow, and we passed on the trail. I told him my intentions and continued on. I discovered the last of the boards of the day. Took a look around the prairie as the sun started to tuck behind the trees, and started my hour hike back to the station. The lighting on the boardwalk was quite low at this point. The cedars are blocking most of the ambient light left by the setting sun and making visibility quite diminished. I'm not a nervous hiker and felt spook easily, having solo hiked for weeks on end in the backcountry I've seen. Lots of cougars, being confronted by Klondike bears in Alaska. Even ran into a few demented hillbillies over the years, but as I left the prairie, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Goosebumps erupt from my forearms. An uneasy feeling swept over me. Suddenly I wanted to walk faster, jog then sprint. I didn't though. I convinced myself that I'd been reading too many fantasy novels and that there's nothing to be scared of. I walk another 5 minutes or so before I start hearing something faint, sounding like music. It's impossible, I tell myself. I'm the only one out here, still at least 2 miles from civilization. And that civilization in reality being likely the only other soul out here. My co-work is sure enough, however. I heard music, more specifically a piano. It started out so faint that I had to stop moving to actually try and hear it. The steps on the wooden boardwalk began too loud. Every time I paused, I heard it unmistakably, it getting louder. I stood there, now fully hidden behind the horizon. I'm now in total silence other than the piano. I became aware that there were no longer the noises of life, i.e. no birds or insects, no wind, no rustling of leaves or underbush. Absolutely nothing other than the piano, as if everything was being weighed down by a fog of emptiness of sorts. I've encountered this dead time before in the woods. Certain places have it, but this is different somehow, unique to this place and this moment in time. I tried to focus on the keys, but I couldn't recognize the composition. Unsurprisingly, as I mostly listened to Metallica and Korn at the time, it was playing with a purpose. It was controlled, in tune and thoughtful. It was a song, and somehow I felt that it was meant for just me at this moment. I started walking again. Almost on cue, the music once again gets louder. As my pace increases, so does the tempo of the keys, still in tune, never floundering. It reaches the perfect moment, almost in sync with my heartbeat, but then as quickly as it came, the piano stopped, whooshed away in a fraction of a moment. It didn't trail off, it didn't fade into extinction, it was just gone. Suddenly, everything that was absent was swept away as if by a gust of wind. The stillness was gone, the gloom and stagnation and weight of everything was lifted. My next step on the boardwalk was once again in reality. The evening was just as absent of light as it was before. Somehow, once again, life is interjected back into the forest and everything's as normal. I didn't hear the piano that night again, nor sense it. I told my co-worker every detail when I reached the bunkhouse. He showed no signs of disbelief. We didn't talk about it again until years later, when something similar happened to another Park Service station employee. When I told my grandfather about what happened, as he's a retired park ranger who had worked nearby at Mora, the next station over, without hesitation he said, "Did you hear bagpipes along with it? Or just a piano?" It seems, as I've learned and experienced since then, there's a lot more to this place, a lot more to the Olympics in general than anyone really knows or is willing to admit. I work for a well-known university as a field biologist and have recently been contracted out of the National Forest Service. My first assignment has been in the Potomac district in the Monongahela National Forest. Basically, I receive GPS coordinates and I either drive or hike to the designated spot and then do whatever they want me to do. This could be setting up trail cameras and or counters, monitoring equipment, trail surveys, and the like, and then recording the data 24 hours after placement. No big deal. I thought it was odd that specifically I was requested to place cameras only 3 feet off the ground, and some of the infrared cameras in trees at specific heights. Some of these locations run designated trails, but others are off the trail in places that humans would never go. Sometimes there isn't a hotel or lodging close enough. Now these are remote mountains in WV, and the Forest Service has outfitted me in some pretty dank camping gear on the occasions I might have to camp. I'm an experienced hiker and camper, and have spent many nights alone out in the field due to my career choice. I am a woman, about 5'6" and 130 pounds, but not really afraid of anything. Again, the Forest Service has outfitted me well, and I wear an emergency beacon that will send every law enforcer officer in the area my location in no time. So I've been assigned to this district for a few months and have really enjoyed my work. VW is a very remote and unspoiled area. I get to see things most people wouldn't, and I've had so many positive and spiritual moments up there. Up until a few nights ago, I was working up near Spruce Knob, which is the highest point in VW, and a complex system of trails, wilderness areas, camping, etc. It has been snowing and howling winds and ice storms. I was camping up there to complete my work while the conditions were rough. I was almost enjoying it. My first night in the woods was very peaceful. I made dinner, set up camp, and drank some whiskey and smoked some really good bud. I snuggled down in my sleeping bag and slept like a rock. It was very cold, but I wear this turtle fur face mask thing and didn't feel the cold too much. I woke up at dawn and went about building my fire back up and started making some more coffee, when I noticed all this churned up snow around my campsite. Not tracks though, just turned up snow, like someone or something had kicked all around. Weird, I think, but whatever. I had a 15-mile hike to set some cameras and didn't have time to really wonder about it. I set off on my hike, did what I do, and started back to camp. I'm never able to wear earbuds or anything, so I have a good sense of my surrounding. Now it's already past dark when I made it back to camp, and I was too tired to do anything except lay and just try and pass out. But around 2 AM, I woke up because I can hear talking. It's people. I was about 30 miles up on a gravel road that was locked with Forest Service gates, about 10 miles from where my truck was parked, and I can hear voices. I completely lose it. I have a firearm and I quietly retrieve it from my backpack, getting in my sleeping bag, cocking it and waiting. I'm on high alert. All my senses are going wild. Eventually the voices faded and I can't hear them anymore, but I never went back to sleep. At daylight, I emerged from my tent to more churned up snow and my 2 trail cameras hanging from a tree about 5 feet from my tent. Cams I placed 15 miles out from my site. I pack up all my stuff and haul out of there as quick as humanly possible. I'm terrified. What the hell has done this? Along the way, I saw lots of human boot tracks of different shoe sizes around my site. I discovered I've been broken into and my computer has also been stolen. I'm currently in a luxury log cabin at some resort, too scared to even retrieve my other equipment and too embarrassed to tell my supervisors just how afraid I am. The Forest Service brought me a new truck while my other one's getting the window replaced, and I did make a report about the theft, but there's no way in hell I'm going back to that site. Who knows how many people are out there or what they wanted from me. I consider this a lucky escape. I don't know if this means I'll be fired or sent to work at a desk, but in all my years of working and doing this in national forests around the country, I've never been more terrified. I'm not scared of the animals, but it's the people that are truly scary out there. I am scared of the people. This story takes place in August of 2013 in the mountains of southern Oregon. I'm a USAF security force airman. My girlfriend was at work, and as the swelteringly hot day began to turn to thunderstorms, my buddy Nick, another MP, and I decided to go exploring the back roads and get out of the heat of the town. Southern Oregon is crisscrossed with logging roads, some actively used, many totally forgotten and overgrown. Nick and I spent many of our days starting on roads that we knew, finding roads we didn't know, driving for hours into the mountains, eventually navigating back to paved roads. On this particular day, with the storm clouds brewing overhead, we set off on a road we'd never been on and drive into the mountains. After driving for an hour, we didn't see nor hear any signs of other people in the woods. We round a bend in the thick fir woods and emerged in a meadow that's totally surrounded by thick aspen. The meadow was perfectly flat, yet eerily still. We both noticed a strange stillness almost immediately. There's no birds, hardly any insect noise, and no squirrels. Certainly no people. On the far side of the meadow, right at the edge of the tree line, is a picnic table. That's odd. It's painted bright orange, and was much larger than a normal one. Remarking on this, Nick drove through to get a closer look. I remembered being apprehensive as we approached. The whole scenario was exceptionally strange. The overall silence of the aspen grove is unsettling. Also, it was nearly impossible to see far into the aspens because they grow close together. We park by the table. I hop out the passenger seat and try and check it out. I'm not very tall though, about 5'5". The table is ridiculously oversized and practically unstable. The seats were nearly at chest height. I would have to climb on to sit in one. As I'm looking at the table, Nick called me over to the truck, and we noticed, looking back into the aspens, that there's no one else here, but it's too quiet. Now at first I don't know what Nick's looking at, but then I notice a splash of colour, completely out of place in the thick trees. I see a small one-man tent that was set back in the trees, about 50 yards from the strange table. Now I have an initial sense of dread, and certainly felt that there's someone in there, and if we could see the tent, they can see us. There were no campgrounds in the area, no people, no main roads for miles. Surely someone camping so remotely would be, at the very least, a strange person. However, as we observe the tent, we don't see any movement or hear any sounds coming from it. Nick suggested I call out. I didn't wanna, but I did. Hey, anyone in there? No reply. Finally, completely on edge, Nick and I thought about driving away and leaving this strange area, but we began to fear the worst. What if there's a body in the tent? What if someone's got kidnapped? Foolish, I know, but we thought it at the same time. After some debate, we decided to have Nick turn the truck around to drive away from the camps, should we need to leave in a hurry. He would be waiting behind the wheel. With my heart pounding, I start walking through the trees towards the tent. I was totally keyed up with my senses high. When I reach the campsite, there's several things that strike out as odd. Backpacks scattered all over. No fire is being built, no wood collected, and the tent is literally packed full of women's clothes. Full of dread, I turn to leave and tell Nick what I've seen. As I turn left, I heard Nick yelling, "Let's go, get out of here, now." Not knowing why he's yelling, I ran back to the truck. When I broke out of the trees, I see an old beat-up Ford on the road blocking us from leaving the meadow. I immediately leaped to the passenger seat and Nick floored the gas pedal. The car was occupied by two men. A third person is lying against the window in the back. As we drove across the meadow, the driver attempts to block us on the road, but Nick drove around them and accelerates the way we've come from. I looked back and saw the car attempting to turn around on the narrow road. Nick drove like a madman, and I was so terrified they'd catch up with us. We hit the highway and got the hell out of there. I called the state police, and they promised to send a trooper out to check the scene. However, I received a call the next day from a trooper stating that the campsite, the packs, and all the women's clothes were gone. Though they could tell someone's been in the area, they couldn't tell where they'd left to. Again, here's one of the stories from when I lived off the grid in the forest of West North Carolina. Some of my friends and I lived in these small shacks, essentially a shed with a loft, that were very close together. Living in such primal and close conditions breeds a kind of deep, trusting friendship you can't get from anywhere else. So naturally, we did almost everything together by a little semicircle of houses. There was a railroad track that, if you followed it south, would lead to a waterfall. This waterfall in particular is where everybody would go to do drugs. It was a normal night, humid, sometime in early July. A group of about 6 friends and I decided to walk out there at night. I was the only sober one in the group, so I felt a higher sense of responsibility for everyone, and therefore was on edge and hyper aware of my surroundings. Others walked slower and faster, or stopped altogether in the group, so it was natural and expected that we wouldn't be able to see everyone at the same time. John was in a rare form though. When someone had to stop to pee, he come out of the bushes and scared her, and then ran off behind the rest of the group. This annoyed me and another person, since it was a clear invasion of privacy and unnecessary. We eventually got to where we could see him again, but he's walking by himself, then slipped back into the bushes without even looking at us. Dismissing it as him being off his head, we kept moving forwards. Still, not back with the whole group yet, we realised that he's following behind us, just far enough that we can see his silhouette. Finally, we catch up with the rest of the group and see that they're accounted for. Even John, we asked him how he got ahead of us and beat the group up ahead, and had been at least 50 yards behind us just a minute ago. But he says he was here the whole time. Literally everyone in the group goes dead silent. That wasn't him that scared the girl when she peed. It wasn't him that followed us. It was someone else entirely. We never made it to that waterfall that night. When I was working as a backpacking guide in Western NC, my schedule dictated a full 8-day shift with 6 days off. During those 6 days, myself and other co-workers would play in the woods. In the summer, you can't beat a mountain swimming hole. One of our favourites was called Paradise Falls, alternatively called Wolf Creek Falls. This is a cliff jumping spot with a huge swimming area, a tiny slot canyon, and an inner pool. Most will venture to do the small jump in the inner pool, even though it's the smallest jump. It's arguably the less accessible. Even though the jump is 9 foot at most, you must work through a 10-minute rock scramble to get to the top. We were all venturing in, and from inside of this tiny canyon, you can't see the main pool. Well, we got to the jump and coaxed the first person off, a fellow guide who had never been to the spot before. She successfully jumped and swam off into the main pool and beach area, and then she screams, because she was now out of sight. Myself and another guy jumped in and swam the short distance to her with the others in tow. Of course, we figured she is injured somehow. She was treading water though, and just staring wide-eyed at the riverbank. When I looked at the shore, there stood a man. Massive, I mean easily 6'7", and a little change. He wore beat-up overalls but no shirt. Perhaps the most disturbing is that He had folds of skin all over his body. Imagine the Michelin Man but made of flesh. His face, his arms, his chest. Everything had a uniform layer of shielding fat rolls. And he was holding a shotgun. The area around Wolf Creek is just holler after holler, but there's a few residents, and those few have been there for generations, propagated by the same families. They do not like outsiders and keep relations within the family. I could only summarize that this individual is a product of inbreeding over decades. Now he just watches as we scrambled to grab anything important, stuffing it in the bag. He just stood there and watched as we hightailed it out of there towards a parking area, and he never says a word. He watches us until we're entirely out of sight. His eyes are piercing me the whole time. So I'm 16 and don't have my license yet. My friend is also 16. As my mum was driving us to his house to drop him off, we're on a really long road for about 20 minutes that was basically completely straight. Wood on both sides, and no side roads that were dead ends. A truck was behind us, which is annoying at first, but eventually got a bit concerning. That their brights were on, and they kept getting closer and closer. Soon my mum's doing 70 on a wooded road in Wisconsin with deer just to avoid this guy. He just kept on getting closer. Eventually my mum tried to do a fox turn into a driveway so he would pass us. He slowed down, and as my mum did a 35-degree turn, he stopped directly in front of the driveway to attempt to block us from the road. My mum floored it, and the guy stopped at the next driveway and literally did the same thing. But we later realised he's following us again. This went on for a good half hour before we ever lost him. Now for context, I'm a 31-year-old female. I frequently visit the nearby parks that are generally well used. It's rare I end up on a hike not seeing at least one or two people. I grew up on camping and hiking trips and feel very comfortable out in nature. I always inform people where I'm going and when I'll be back. I have to do safety first, right? One day last year, I was going stir crazy, so I took myself out on a popular nature educational centre. There's a bunch of trails that stem from one spot. They're not long trails, but all interconnected, so it's easy to create your own distance. It's midweek, so I'm not expecting to encounter many people. Maybe a school group at most. I grab my backpack, lock the car and head out. It's a beautiful sunny day. Mid-autumn, so a bit chilly out. I was listening to the sounds of nature around me, some squirrels, birds, even a deer crossed my trail at one point. I was sticking with the main trail, which had educational signs identifying different types of plants as you went along. I made my way up the first little hill and made my way down the path where it makes a sharp turn. Up ahead, I caught sight of a man wearing a dark blue jacket. Strange. I haven't seen any signs of a person or heard anyone whatsoever. Normally I'm confronted seeing someone else, but this time my gut instinct is not happy. I take note of the way the person went and continue along. Blue jacket had taken the path. I wanted to create a longer hike. It would have been a lot more secluded and less travelled, so for once I tried to be smart. I listened to my gut and just followed the main route back to my car. keeping it short and safe. I still had about 2 kilometers to get back to the parking lot. The clouds decide they want to make a skirt across the sky, making the woods dull and ominous. I keep looking over my shoulder, feeling very unsettled. The trees cast finger-like shadows that do not help calm my imagination whatsoever. One of my favourite spots on the trail had a few huge boulders and rock formations right in the middle that you had to go around. I really dreaded going through them in this kind of weather. Now I can't pinpoint at first until I notice some scuffs around the base of the rocks going the other way round that something's wrong here. The trail is very obvious, which is you should go to the left, but these marks are going the wrong way. It looked like someone walked around the rocks dragging their feet behind them. An animal? Maybe. I can't figure it out. I wanted to turn around and go back the way I came, but this would have added an easy 4 kilometers back to the car. I stuck close to the far side of the real path, keeping a close eye on the rock formation. As I made it to the other side of the rocks, I caught sight of some fabric. The same blue fabric I saw earlier. The person moved as though ducking between some rocks to avoid me. For Blue Jacket Man to reach the rocks before me, he had to cut through the woods or have sprinted a good 5 kilometers of trail. I didn't like either option, as I don't know this person and don't want to know them. Maybe he's taking a leak. Yeah, I'll go for that. I pick up my pace and dug out my phone. I texted my usual hiking friend telling them the details in case I suddenly go missing. I glance behind me again, and he's standing there now staring at me. I pick up the pace and sprint the way back to my car, hopping in, immediately locking the doors. Now more weirdly, there's no other cars in the area, and there's no nearby towns, so I have no clue how he got here. I took a couple of minutes to sort myself out, to calm down, to speed out of there. And as I'm doing so, there's that damn blue jacket on the signpost that I've just passed to get in my car with no one nearby. How the hell could he have got there that quick? It doesn't make sense. I've been so spooked by the encounter that I refuse to ever hike again on my own. I still have no explanation to what that guy wanted, or how he moved so quick to this day. When I was a junior in college, I went camping with 4 friends in Bald Eagle State Park in PA. We had reserved a campsite that was pretty remote, pretty deep in the park, way up on one of the mountains, not near by any other campsite. It was located at the end of a narrow dirt road, maybe about 75 feet long, which itself broke off from the main road, which I think was also dirt. There was nothing at the end of the little road but our campsite. We parked at the entrance to the park, spent all day hiking up to the site, setting up camp and then hiking around. We made a fire, made dinner and turned in. Not long afterwards, we discovered that one of the guys with us snored loudly, like shake the walls of the tent loud. Truly deafening stuff. After probably half an hour or so, the rest of us gave up on trying to sleep, climbed into our tents, leaving our loud friend snoring away. My friend at the time was a DJ for our school's radio station. She had a late night show. I think she was on between midnight and 2 AM. Since we couldn't sleep, we trekked up to the main road where the reception's better, where we would actually be able to hear the radio over the snores. When we got back to the road, We stood in a low circle around the entrance at our site. As we stood up there, a black pickup with its lights off appeared out of the woods and passed us very slowly. It was unmarked, so not a ranger. We listened to the radio for maybe half an hour or 45 minutes after that, and even briefly called in to say hi. Finally though, we decided to go back to bed. One of the girls went off into the woods to take care of some things while I climbed back into the tent. I shared with her and got into my bag. After a couple of minutes, I heard her moving through the leaves towards the tent, coming from my right. At the same time, I also heard the unmistakable rumble of tires on the ground. I stood up and looked out of the little screen window of the tent. We hadn't bothered to put up the rain fly, as it's a perfectly clear night with a very bright moon, so I can see everything. I saw my friend come sprinting back to the tent and duck behind it, just as a black truck pulls into our campsite, still with its headlights off, and then shuts off its engine and sits there. Our friend is still snoring. I have a little knife in my tent, and I know my other two friends have at least one in theirs, but we have no other weapons, no guns or bear spray, so I just watch. As I said, it's a clear night. I can see the truck just fine. It's maybe 20 feet from my tent, but I can't see who's in the truck or how many people are in there. Nothing seems to be moving inside the truck. I still remember the metallic clunk as the engine turned off. I honestly have no idea for how long I watched it. My friend had ducked down behind our tent, and I could hear by her breathing that she's terrified. Neither of us said a word. It feels like a really long time went by. It had to have been at least 10 minutes, but it could have been half an hour or more. We just kept waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. Eventually the truck started up again, and then backed up down the long narrow dirt road. I never saw it turn its headlights on. I heard it drive back in the direction it originally come from, and that was it. My friend burst into the tent a second later. Now we're all talking. Did you see that? What the hell? But our friend is still asleep. Eventually we went back to bed. We packed up and headed out in the morning as planned. And yes, we checked with the park, and they do not own any black unmarked SUVs, nor did any ranger come to check on our campsite at night. My fiance and I were camping, as we've done many times at a particular state park that we enjoy going. Everything was normal. We made some dinner on the fire, stayed up for a bit and let the fire die, and went to go into the tent. Despite reading so many stories, the woods never scared me. This night my brain decided that a reoccurring nightmare about someone walking through our tent at night would be a good idea. So I'm going through these cycles of dreaming that I've woken up to footsteps around my tent, trying to wake up my fiance, Fallon, then going to sleep again, and eventually waking up realizing nothing's here. Though this time, I realize I'm not dreaming. There's definitely footsteps. Then I hear a deep, low, throaty growl, and I'm petrified. I manage to reach over to wake up my fiance, whispering there's someone outside. He wakes up, and we continue to hear something walking around the tent, growling and snarling. We're terrified now. I've never heard anything like it. From the sounds of it, this thing is very big, or an insane person, we can't tell. We're trying to peek out but can't see anything. The noises move over to the edge of the site, and there's a lot of growling, then screaming, then silence. Then it's on the other side of the tent. This is making it really hard to decide what to do. We're trying to be silent while gathering what little feeble weapons we have. Me with my canister of pepper spray. My husband has a knife. Now, we don't even have a hatchet on us because I left it at home. Basically, if we're attacked, we're screwed. Now, there's some screaming going on along the edge of the site now. It sounds like every small animal in northeastern United States is being skinned alive around us. I'm shaking. I had to stand because the adrenaline pumping felt like I was about to pass out. We still can't pinpoint where this thing is or catch any glimpses of it. We're definitely gonna die now. It's late in the season, there's maybe one other occupied site, and we showed up late. We're about to be eaten or mauled. I'm losing it. Finally, in a couple of minutes of silence, we realise that there's a sound of something going away. We decide to quickly grab our wallets, not even our supplies. I wouldn't have even cared how many paychecks worth of gear we had there. We were going to hit the car panic button and run for it while presumably this beast is not long gone from us, hoping that it will eventually return to our camp again. So we rush out and try and use the car to make as much sound as possible. We then hit a convenience store to go home for the night, then gear up in the morning with some high-powered CO2 weapons and everything. But we go back and didn't find anything. We literally don't see any sign of any of our stuff. It's all been taken. Whatever that was out there still remains unknown to us.